Girl Scouts does a really good job of developing our future leaders so that they can step up and lead us in the future. And we're very honored to have them here tonight. So if everyone wants to stand, then you all can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to do a picture in just a few minutes, but we have to do our roll call first, okay? Okay, now if you would do roll call.
Mayor Holtzclaw. Mayor Pro Tem Vanel.
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Here.
Councilmember Steckler.
Here.
Councilmember Allison.
Here.
Councilmember Duque.
Here.
Councilmember Paddock.
Present.
Mayor Holtzclaw told us that he'll be unavailable this evening. Do I have a motion to excuse?
So move.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now that we have opened the meeting, we will take a moment and go ahead and have a picture with our Girl Scouts that opened our meeting this evening so they can have a picture with the council.
Okay, is everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's say on 3, say Girl Scout cookies. 1, 2, 3. Oh, all right.
Good job.
Good job.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comment, I would like to make a motion. I'd like to entertain a motion to move item 8A of the agenda up to right after public comment so that those who are waiting for the arts and beautification appointments can find out early without having to watch the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Today, Councilmember Duque, Councilmember, pardon me?
What?
So moved.
So I need a motion.
Second.
Oh, you should need a motion first. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. So we will move that up right after public comment. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And now we have audience communication. Is there, I see Barb has raised her hand. Barb, name, address, in 3 minutes.
Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place, Southeast. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I wish to express my gratitude to Jody and Scott for all their help to make the Meet the Chief event such a big success. Thank you to Detective White and Sergeant Fouch for helping and interacting with all the attendees. Also to Denise and Jill staying late and giving tours of the police department. It was nice to see many of the council members and city employees supporting this event. As there is more collaboration throughout the city, it becomes a more pleasant atmosphere for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone online like to speak? Going once? Okay, we'll say no. Thank you. There'll be a chance for comment at the end of the meeting. First, I'm going to go ahead and move forward to the proclamation, and then we can do the appointment. So I have a proclamation of the city of Mill Creek. Whereas the city of Mill Creek takes pride in recognizing February 2023 as Black History Month, a time dedicated to remembering and celebrating Black culture, history, contributions, and sacrifices made to create a brighter future for all Americans. And whereas Black History Month celebrates the achievements of African Americans, who have been instrumental in shaping the character, culture, and economic life of our state and nation. And whereas Dr. Carter G. Woodson, founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, first launched Negro History Week in 1926 and is widely regarded as the father of Black history. And whereas in 1976, the informal expansion of Negro History Week to Black History Month was officially recognized by the United States government. And whereas the 2023 theme, Black Resistance, focuses on how African Americans have addressed historic and continuously ongoing disadvantages and oppression in their everyday lives as seen by recent historical moments. Nonetheless, disadvantage and oppression transcend overt instances of violence. And whereas Black History Month is an occasion to rediscover the enduring stories of African Americans and the gifts of freedom, purpose, and opportunity they have bestowed on future generations, it is also a time to commemorate the countless contributions of African Americans, many of whom lived through and surmounted the scourge of segregation, racial prejudice, and discrimination to enrich every fiber of American life. Their examples of heroism, patriotism, and enterprise have given people of all backgrounds confidence, courage, and faith to pursue their own dreams. And whereas Black History Month is a time to recognize and honor the many people, events, and significant contributions of Black and African Americans to our community, nation, and world. Now, therefore, I, Stephanie Vignal, the Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Mill Creek, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2023 as Black History Month and ask all residents of Mill Creek to join me in commemorating the countless contributions of African Americans to our nation and the world. Thank you. Next, I will move forward and we will go ahead and move down to item 8A, Arts and Beautification Board interviews and appointments.
This is the right time, okay?
This is the right
I'm
time.
gonna go again. I'm gonna launch. Okay, here we go. You know how much I like to talk. Okay. Well, today, Councilmember Decay, Councilmember Paddock, as well as the Arts and Beautification Chair, Carmen Fisher, and myself held interviews. And based on the interviews that we had today, we would like to make a motion to recommend first Penelope Moon, a local educator and lover of the arts, and also Peter Furtado, who is a proud 16-year resident and is looking forward to sharing his vision and ideas for the city as our two positions. Second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on, we have under presentations, we have Martin, City Manager, is going to give us a presentation on their visit with the Association of Washington Cities on City Action Days.
Okay, can you hear me pretty clear? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, staff, thank you. Welcome. I just wanted to cover the 2023 City Action Days. It was February 16th, 15th and 16th. Deputy City Manager and myself had a chance to go down to Olympia. We did not go to the Hill, but we did go to the conference that was held at the Olympia Hotel. Great experience. Let's see here. I did it. Today's agenda,
Martin, you're not, did you want it on the screen?
no, it's
Oh.
not working, sorry,
Oh,
but you
sorry.
can't see it on your.
Yeah.
Screen, yeah. And I did want to say that the projector is not working today. Something happened after the power went out, and I think
Got it.
something, it did something to the projector, so we tried to fix it, but as long as everybody could see it, I think we're okay. So City Action Days was an event, as I mentioned, on the 15th and 16th, and it was a 2-day event. It was a great opportunity for us to learn about, well, the agenda today is I'll go over City Action Days and the key 7 takeaways that we experienced, or I experienced over the course of those 2 days. Then I'll cover some next steps, kind of what we're going to do internally here. And the timeline for the Olympia legislative session. So the goal of AWC really is to let the cities understand that we, as you as electeds and we as staff supporting you, are really the link between our community, our businesses, our residents, and that link to our legislators. And it's a critical process that we need to follow every year to ensure that we meet those needs of our residents. And that entails following bills, tracking bills, and so forth. One of the things that we experienced at the event was a networking opportunity. We got to meet, just mayors, council members, city managers, administrators from across the state. There were about 350 participants in this event, from probably close to half of the cities in the state. Some of the individuals I met, I shared some common interest with a city manager from Sunnyside, because I am from Eastern Washington, so we kind of had some similarities there. I met the mayor of supposedly the longest beach in the world, or the top 10, Long Beach, Washington, Mayor Jerry Phillips, and it was a great conversation that we had. It was a good opportunity to just connect, and then he was more than happy to share his best practices and kind of things that he did in Long Beach, and so it was a great experience. And then the last person I met was the mayor from one of our colleagues stays up north, Mount Vernon, Mayor Jill Boudreau. One thing that she brought to light was a huge 53 million Library Commons project. And the reason why I thought it'd be great to mention this is because they're kind of thinking forward, kind of along the lines that a lot of agencies nowadays are thinking about in terms of co-locating agencies and bringing community services together in one location to meet the needs of the communities. It's no longer the old thinking where you build a library in one place and that's it, and you're just thinking about the library services. But nowadays, companies are starting to, and organizations are starting to think about how to come together and leverage that collaboration across agencies. There's cost savings in it. It delivers more value, and it brings communities more together eventually in the long run. That 50 million project is a library commons that services seniors, kids. And the reason I'm talking about it, because I thought it was really interesting. Community events, it has spaces for community members to use. And supposedly on the I-5 corridor, it has the largest mega electric charging facility for electric vehicles. They're trying to take advantage of that corridor between Seattle and Vancouver. So we could probably learn a lot of best practices from that, kind of around the region, to see kind of what other agencies are working on, to give us ideas. DRCC came to mind. I had recent discussions with our partner from Snow Isle Libraries as well. So down the road, we'll start talking more about kind of their thoughts about what they're thinking. They're thinking forward too, similarly about co-locating with different organizations to kind of deliver that library service to our community and adjacent cities and counties. So, so yeah, it was a great opportunity. Networking was huge. So I've never seen so many mayors and council members in my life, but I'm used to seeing seven every week, but yeah, they were everywhere. But anyway, it was good. Advocacy 101. As you're all aware, you remember Candace Bach, who presented a while back. She again kind of explained all the tools and resources that AWC has to help cities. As you know, collectively together, these 281 cities are very powerful. And so they have a multitude of resources that we can use moving forward that we will, you'll hear more about as our team puts together a plan for 2024. One of the big presentations that came to mind is the deal that came to light and that I was impressed on was the DLC, Department of Commerce. They didn't go over too much about kind of what they did other than this brief overview of the departments. But they did bring up one key topic, which I'll bring up in a little bit. The 5 key departments across the DLC is and this is important to understand, so you kind of have an idea of where some of the projects we're working on fall under. The local government division houses the growth management division, broadband, community, capital, community development, and R&D services. That's where the GMA sits, and a lot of other services that relate to local municipalities and governments. The other division is the housing division, which deals with multifamily assistance, homelessness, how to help people, and so forth. Economic development, that's where they work on the economic strategy. They deal with things related to jobs, wages, and business development as well. And the other division, the third one, is energy, where they work on climate goals, decarbonization, solar energy, and so forth. And then the final one is community services, where they deal with crime victim advocacy, and also assistance to help those individuals. And there's also prevention mechanism there too that they house in that division. So, but yeah, the total of 5 divisions across the DLC. The next presentation that came to light that I thought was real important was the National League of Cities. They're an organization that houses about 2,700 cities and towns across the United States. Their sole goal is they've been around for 100 years, and their mission is to advocate for and protect the interests of cities, towns, and villages by influencing federal policy. So they do a lot of advising and informing cities of the policies and the bills that are coming through at the federal level. And the 2 things that stood out was ARPA and IRA. IRA is Inflation Reduction Act, just to let you know. So to start with that is a federal bill that really covers a lot of different things. It's really to curb inflation or low cost on prescription drugs. That's the laws that give credits back to individuals for buying electric vehicles. It helps businesses in terms of vehicles as well. Fuel related items and tax credits that businesses use in a lot of different areas, but it's just a multitude of things. But the big one is really the regarding clean air and climate change. And what they're trying to do is reduce, there's a $369 billion fund there to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. And to give a little comparison of where that stands in terms of the global goals, the Paris Accord, which you're probably mostly familiar with, their goal is 50% by 2030. So it's pretty close. So there's a big move just locally and across the globe to decarbonize or reduce gas emissions across the entire world. ARPA, a lot of emphasis on ARPA. You're all aware that by 2024, we have to have obligated our funds and paid for by the end of 2026. They stressed immensely how important it is for us to have a plan, which you've already started, but really have it nailed down real soon. The government continually is tracking how we are using our ARPA funds. And so decisions are being made constantly. So it is really critical that we nail those down really quick to figure out how we're going to spend that money. So the 7 key takeaways from this 2-day retreat, as I mentioned, cities have powerful voices collectively. Again, that's where the power is. And the senators and the representatives that we listened to were very convincing, and they emphasized how important it was. And there were even speakers that spoke to us or asked questions of the panel members that came up through all the presentations, and you could tell just in the room how important it was these initiatives that these mayors of all these cities were bringing forward, and how sincere that these representatives were in terms of trying to meet the needs. Of course, they can't meet everybody's needs, but they do understand the power that we have collectively as strong cities. When I first stepped into the actual retreat, the very first presentation was on equity. There's a big move towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's something that's been around a long time. The city of Seattle has race and social justice initiative that started many, many years ago. The city of Olympia put forward a structure on how they address equity across their policy decisions. But this also impacts cities at a operational level as well. And so, like we at the city of Mill Creek, a lot of cities are starting to acknowledge the need for improvements, or at least addressing the need to support our changing demographics, to bring them up to speed or a level of service that that's equitable across everyone. Housing. It's very complicated. There's a lot of bills that they put forward, and that was a really big emphasis on in discussions on housing. And the housing bills are covering all kinds of topics. Legislators and officials kind of alike spoke to the need of holistic approaches to try to address, for example, changing codes. But they do realize, though, that there's no single housing policy or approach that would address all different areas. And so one of the big takeaways from this one is that the city spoke to the intense need and desire to really maintain some of that decision-making authority at the local level, because they truly believe that these holistic approaches will not address all the needs of every single type of city and the culture across the state. So that's what was communicated at the AWC on the housing part of it. Public safety. We've been talking a lot about the two major initiatives that are going through. Cities are all connected about the same thing, about making sure that we're safe. And as you know, the vehicle pursuit restrictions, as well as the drug position, are the two main ones. Without going into too much, everything's moving now, and everything's changing. There are a lot of things happening. Most recently, the biggest changes are a lot of components of vehicle pursuits and how you pursue. They've added things back in that allow officers to do that, but these are just temporary changes that still are going through discussions. So nothing's concrete, so we can't really provide any type of definition on kind of where we're at this point. But there's a lot of divide across the aisle in different manners. But I think we're moving in the right direction on that. And then on the drug possession, one of the big things is just making sure that there's enough funding from the time the rest is happening to when there's some behavioral issues and there's training and transitioning throughout their entire process. So the funding was a key issue, because once you deal with it on the front end, there's all these costs that are incurred throughout the entire process, including legal and taking care of the individuals as well. So budget was a big topic. Budget leaders are cautiously optimistic. I don't know if you're aware, but in the past 10 years, the state's budget went from 30 billion to 70 billion. The past few years have been surprisingly good. Revenues came in at a strong pace. And so lawmakers are actually urging cities to look for grant funding. And legislators are being tasked now of distributing funds. So cities are reaching out to those legislators quite a bit now, from what I'm hearing, what I'm talking about to our colleagues as well, that they're there's a lot of asking going on now. It's something that we need to be aware of as well. And then transportation. This is the least that I know about, or what I was familiar with when I was there, but they didn't really talk too much detail, but rather than just to say that there's a lot of projects on the transportation side that were delayed during the pandemic. So a lot of these projects are being now slated for commencement, but and those are the ones that are typically mandated by federal law. For example, it's culverts I see here is something that they were working on. Plus, they also mentioned the Columbia River Bridge. So there's some projects that were already federal law mandated. So they'll work on those first then. But I think the whole takeaway here is just that they're starting to move back on transportation. And the money's starting to flow. And so everything's starting to move back. And so you'll see in the next few years. Now, we did hit a peak in terms of revenue across the state. So they think it's going to probably settle a little bit, but we'll still be pretty well off in the next few years. Then finally, the public works assistance account. I think the past few years, money's been swiped out of this account, and the most recent years used for, I think, education and things of that sort, which probably where it needed to go at the time. I don't know, but it's an account that's been on the radar for probably since 2013, I think it is. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but this account actually provides the funding for infrastructure, surface water, sewer, and so forth for aging cities. And finally, with AWC has been working on it for many years, and there's agreement on both sides of the aisle on this one. And so that money, after the 2023 is ended, all that money will start to come back in this account, and they'll fully fund it. At least that's what they're moving, and they're very close to it. I think approving that. So that's a good thing for all the local cities, and I'm sure Director Todd's happy about that too. So next steps. It's the wrong order, but timeline for 2023 in Olympia. Just a snapshot of kind of key dates. January 9th is when the first session. April 23rd is when April 23rd is when is the last day of session. They adjourn. March 8th is the next key date where they consider the bills by 5 p.m. And then on the opposite side, the House, all the committees on the House side look at all the bills. This is new to me. So what they did realize that there are 20 Senate committees. There are a number of joint committees as well. And on the House side, there are 15 and they're joint. So they cover housing, budget, capital, community, everything you could think of. So that's a snapshot. Legislative committee, our legislative committee, Mayor Pro Tem, Council members Duque and Allison, we've been meeting. Going forward, in March, we'll start providing weekly updates should there be any changes to these bills that we have on our legislative agenda. And we'll also bring forward any new bills possibly that may be of interest to council or things that we need to monitor over time. We'll have a spreadsheet that we're going to put together in a tracking system. So our executive team is working on that. So we're trying to bring things up to speed this year because we're a little late on the process, but we'll definitely have something for you in March, probably mid-March. That will entail research and tracking on both the city side. And so we'll get caught up on all the bills, any incidental bills to the main ones that are on our legislative agenda. So you'll see more to come. Lobby days is March 16th. So Deputy City Manager and myself will have the opportunity to go up to the Hill. We're going to schedule meetings with our state electeds, and we'll have a chance to meet with them. Now, keep in mind, this is actually a function of our electeds, you. This year, we're going to go ahead and fill that spot and go up there. And then by 2024, we'll put together a full blown out process. that would be a little more organized and from beginning to end. So and that'll start in May. And you'll hear more about that probably in April as we put the plan together. We'll lay it out in a way that will be a little smoother than this year. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Councilmember Steckler?
Great recap. Thank you, Martin. I had three questions that I wanted to just ask you about. First one, I've been hearing you talked about housing, one of the issues up there. And I recently read an article about state legislation looking at getting rid of the single family home zoning code. Did they talk about that at all during the meeting? Did they address it? Did anybody have any comments about that? Because it's a pretty big, bold move from our state.
They didn't talk about specifics about the actual bills that are going through 12, 20, 11, 10. There was a lot of emphasis on homelessness and the need for affordable housing and
Right.
Connecting the zoning laws to everything. So, but they didn't go into any details on where the bills are. Is that what you're asking?
No, I just, the one
Mark?
particular bill that is talking about changing the zoning statewide to basically take out this single family zone ruling, which is kind of grandfathered in and open up more housing for multiple units
I
within
think we're
a
talking
single
about
unit.
1110, which is for cities above 25,000, but there might be a restriction or a qualification that if it's along a transit line or something of that sort, that it may qualify the city of Mill Creek, but I'm not sure about that. Mayor Pro Tem might have. an answer to that.
Thank you, City Manager. That's what I was gonna say. This, I believe has to do, because I read the article too. I believe this is the bill that I've been flagging. That's House Bill 1110. There has been a little bit of change in that because now it's not going to apply to cities below 25,000.
Okay.
But what it's doing is it is making it to where they're required to allow the duplexes on all lots. And so that's what that article is talking about. And it did have a different threshold, but they've adjusted it. And so I wanted to flag that for Will, if he's on here listening as well, that right now they've lowered it to 25,000 is where that marker is. So we would not fall into it. But of course, these things are fluid because it's still in the house. So it could change, but right now it's not going to apply to us, but cities larger than 25,000, it will apply to. And then it was, hold on, I don't remember, and I don't want to tell you wrong. Because it's like 25,000 to 75,000, I believe, that if you're on the line that would go up part of the urban growth area in a seamless line that would go up to a city that was like 200,000, I believe. Then you would have to be part of that. I had a discussion with with Director Todd regarding that we are not in the continuous line for the city of Mill Creek. So I wanted to make sure that language. So hopefully that addresses what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure that's what they were talking about, John.
Yeah, I was just curious if they addressed it because it's a pretty controversial issue and I was wondering if there was much discussion about that. But that sounds like there was not.
No, there wasn't.
No, okay.
there wasn't.
All right. And on the grant opportunities at the state level that you talked about, I'd heard about this as well. And I was wondering if on March 16th, when you're going back to the Hill, are you going back with some specific asks of our state legislators and get in line for that?
There's two asks that we already submitted for,
Okay,
which is on our legislative agenda. The first one is the improvements and maintenance to City Hall North.
mhm,
That is in the realm of, I think it's under $1 million, somewhere under 750. The second one is the DRCC site planning.
right, the consulting group, yeah.
Correct, and those are the two. The state electeds are aware of those two, which we spoke to them about. So I don't see this as a need to really to discuss this too much other than kind of where we're at with it. And if they have any questions about the specifics of our projects, but but
So
those are the
your
two, so
recommendation is
we're
go
not
back
gonna-
with these two. That's what your recommendation is.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct, yeah.
And then finally, you had that final division, those 5 divisions up there, and the one that was community development, can you define what they define community development as in that division?
Yeah, I think that was under housing, not the local government.
Right,
So the community development division,
I think it was under government, not
was it
housing.
local government?
Yeah, remember the early part when you were talking about the 5 divisions?
Yeah, I don't
under-
remember the specifics on exactly what that entails. I think it's a building the programs that allow for housing. There's a lot of things on housing.
So community development to them is really focused on housing.
I think it is.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That's what I took from the PowerPoint.
Thanks. That's all I had. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I forgot for a moment that I am
didn't
the
know
one
that-
that's responsible for
I
that.
didn't know if there was someone else that had one.
Councilmember Paddock.
So you dropped a little tidbit in there about the feds might be looking at our ARPA funding and what's being spent and what's not being spent. Is
They
that,
are, I believe they are tracking according to what I hear. They're trying to get an idea of what cities are spending on.
okay, so it's not a matter of if you haven't spent it.
No, it's
Spent it.
not. No, it's
Okay,
not.
okay. That sounded a little ominous. I just wanted to make sure that. I
Yeah,
understood
no,
that.
I think it, to me, what I see it as a commit your funds, make a
Mhm.
plan if you truly need to spend on it. I
But-
tried to read into it
Mhm.
more than that, and I think without telling us kind of what they are, what the feds are thinking, but the feds are always thinking about this, is what they were telling us. They're
Mhm.
continually thinking about how these funds are being spent.
But it doesn't
Yeah.
sound like we should change from spend wisely rather than spend in a hurry.
I think it's both. I think it'd be prudent of us to put together a plan.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear is get the plan allocated.
Now, I don't know, that's
Figure it out.
probably prudent anyways, but that's what I heard is that, there's discussion on things, the ARPA funds, so. Whatever those discussions were, I'm not sure exactly, but, be real careful because if you don't spend it, you never know what might happen.
That's what I had.
Any more questions? Councilmember Duque?
Yeah, I was going to say to Councilmember Paddock, when in our legislative committee meeting on Friday, that was one of the things we discussed, and we all said the importance of moving forward with that before it becomes an issue. And so thank you, Martin, for this and for all that you're doing.
Any other questions? Perfect, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Next up, we have Chief White talking about the approval of resolution for a 2-year limited term for Deputy Director of Public Safety / Deputy Chief of Police.
This is control, sorry.
Evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council, staff, audience members. All right, maybe this is a little bit better. All right. So today I'm going to go through some of the discussions regarding Deputy Director of Public Safety, Deputy Chief of Police. This is an old business topic that we brought to you on the 14th. And there we go. So the position of Deputy Director of Public Safety / Deputy Chief of Police has been part of this agency for quite some time. In various fluctuations, they've been here, they've been gone. This position has been funded, unfunded. Going back to Scott drowned as a commander well before my time, from Ken Neville, Lance Davenport, and most recently with Scott Eastman. This is a very a vital role in most police agencies, which forms a leadership team, which then is able to progress things much rapidly. The vital functions of this Deputy Director of Public Safety position, Deputy Chief of Police, has several functions. Many of them are listed in your packet. However, the top ones that I wanted to discuss with you today are, this individual is going to be evaluating efficiencies and effectiveness of departmental processes. We have a lot of things that are going on. We have a lot of projects, a lot of priorities that are set by the city manager and from the council. So this individual is working on those in conjunction with me to make sure that we're keeping the momentum rolling. They're going to develop the leadership skills of our first level supervisors. Some of the things that we have to look at is succession planning, who's going to be the next person up. So we want to develop the skills of the people that are in those first level supervision positions now, so that when the time comes, they're ready to step up and take that lead. Making sure the department personnel are assigned and deployed to provide optimum efficiency and effectiveness. So we're constantly looking at how we can maximize our staffing levels. How are we going to provide the best safety to our community by resource allocation? So that's one of the things we also talked about in our staffing study that we want to produce this year or over this next biennium. So that we're making sure that we have enough officers in place, that we're actually allocating those officers in functions that are actually going to help us to provide that safe community that we've been talking about. With emphasis on the key priorities of the department, which is the criminal behavior, criminal action in the city, traffic safety, and quality of life issues that we want to provide to the city. We're also going to oversee and participate in timely recruiting. As you know, with the hiring of a consultant we had recently, the recruiting efforts were maximized. And we've been able to take real advantage of that over the last 8 to 10 months. And so hiring nearly just over 50% of our department in that time period after we had that mass exodus. Also going to oversee development of an implementation of training. We have training requirements annually from the state of Washington. And we want to make sure that our training is up to par and above reproach. We do receive 24 hours of training through a regional participation in a training program, but we're also trying to provide additional training that will just ensure that our officers are knowledgeable and able to perform at a high level. Some of the ancillary duties that this individual might be taking on is scheduling. We just procured some scheduling software that's going to make this function quite a bit easier. It makes us capable of web access, a cloud-based web service, so we can see the schedule all the time. It's just a really great program. It's going to interface with our Springbrook software, which is going to allow us to more effectively track time the officers are putting in and what they're actually doing during that time. If it's overtime, if it's accrued time off that they're taking, it's just a great opportunity. This individual also could help with the fleet maintenance operations that we have in the department. Right now, we have an individual who's our detective sergeant who is actually working on fleet maintenance. And it pulls him away substantially from his job as a detective sergeant. Just making sure that we have quite a few cars in our fleet, and just the routine maintenance of those cars can take up quite a bit of time. So taking these ancillary duties away from sergeants who should be supervising as first level supervisors and out there with their people on the road, this is going to be a great addition to us. It's going to make our patrol function a lot more efficient. And quartermaster job, that is a job where we're allocating issuing equipment and uniforms to the officers. Typically in our agency, this has been a job that's done when they're hired. We issue them their initial gear, and we do keep that gear in good order and maintained. But we don't have a traditional quartermaster process where we have things on hand that we're storing. We don't have the bandwidth in our facility to house that many items. And we're not really looking to do that. But this individual would be able to take it from the recruiting standpoint, kind of naturally flows into the quartermaster and what we're going to be issuing and then maintaining and bringing back to the agency if someone were to retire or transition to another agency. And then the reinstatement of this position, really it brings us up into the best practices of what law enforcement is doing today. Most agencies are sized with 22 FTEs that are in the patrol and commission side of this, plus an additional 5 support individuals. Most agencies that size have a leadership team. It's not being taken care of by one person. The duty of a chief is, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of working with the city manager, deputy city manager. And it doesn't provide a lot of bandwidth to take care of the other things that are going on operationally. And so by adding this individual, it provides us a lot more bandwidth, and it's going to create a higher functioning team. So after our meeting on the 14th, deputy city manager and I posted this position online via our website and some other electronic options. The 21st was set as the first initial review of applications for individuals in this position. We received 15 in that 1 week period. We were able to conduct some interviews, and we're ready to move forward with the next part of this process. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Do you have any questions? Councilmember Paddock?
The 360, is that per year or is that per the biennium?
For the term,
For the term, which would be 24
the
months.
24-month term.
Thank you.
Councilmember Duque, and then Councilmember Allison.
On the first slide, you mentioned unfunded in 2020 for that position. Was it unfunded in the previous? I'd like to learn more about that because that's a pretty big statement to put on the PowerPoint.
I think it was a lot of concern from the city regarding COVID and what the pandemic might do to resources that we had available. And so that was the one position that they thought that might aid, and it was becoming vacant as it was.
Okay, so it was.
So there, it was unfunded, but it was because there was either a person that was going to either was possibly moving into the chief's position
Mhm.
and some other influences.
Okay, but that's the reason why it
Yeah.
was unfunded.
That
Thank you.
that is my understanding.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
I just was wondering, you talked about the training. Is that classroom training, online training, or field training?
It's a combination of classroom training and practical training.
Okay.
So
field training.
officers are run through practical courses, scenario based. Officers are also spending time in the classroom with legal updates and things of that nature.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks, Chief. Thanks for the presentation. I won't go down the trail of my comments just yet because I'll wait till there's a motion on the floor and maybe discuss it a little more in depth. How come, I realize you need help, right? I know it's a one-man operation and it's difficult at this point. Why not perhaps utilize our current ranks? And here's why I ask that. 350,000 plus is a lot of money. It's 6% of the ARPA funds that we have at this time. What if we took the mindset that perhaps training our sergeants and corporals, maybe even sending them to the FBI Leadership Academy on a one-time basis here, and create a robust internal training mechanism? Because it sounds to me like there's an administrative lieutenant need here. And by maybe moving down that road, I think we would serve a lot of things, actually. We would allow for growth within the organization. We would allow for recruitment. And I think it would really boost the morale of the troops as well as to see a lot more upward mobility within the department. I think there's a pretty excited group out there. And I'm sure we can pluck a few out of them to maybe fill this void. And when it comes to training as well, like you mentioned, like a quartermaster, I mean, we can always pay 3% to another deputy or another officer that might want to do something like that. So I think there's opportunity here, but I'll go into it a little bit more, but I was never a fan of the whole idea of the deputy city manager position for an agency our size. Oh, sorry.
So
Deputy Chief, sorry.
I can appreciate that. I will say that we are already utilizing our staff, sergeants and corporals, to take on a lot of these ancillary duties. And what we're finding is that it's taking them away from the first line supervisory duties that they need to be out on the road. They're spending an exorbitant amount of time in the office doing those administrative functions. and not being readily available to the officers in the field. If you look at agencies our size, apples to apples agencies such as Mukilteo, same demographic, same land size, same population, almost nearly the same. They also have a deputy chief and they also have an administrative sergeant. So, and you know, you look at the city of Lake Forest Park, they have 2 lieutenants and a chief, and that's a city the size of 15,000. So I think that what we've been trying to do is what you're discussing, and it's been somewhat effective that we are providing some administrative skills to the individuals, like you pointed out. I agree with that 100%. What I do also feel is that we could be much more efficient and we could provide a better service if we had some folks out on the road that were supervisors with their people. We do send our sergeants to FBI LEADA training, which is at 3 different levels. The National Academy is a 3-month commitment when we're sending them away for 3 months and then we're having a staffing issue again. So those are some of the concerns that we've thought of, and I'm happy to have more discussion, and I think that's a great idea, but I think that the direction that is outlined here would be that we've already gone down in the past, that is consistent with the agencies that we are comparable to, is the best action for us right now.
Councilmember Allison?
One more question, sorry. Was this a commissioned spot? I can't remember.
I've left it open as a commissioned and a non-commissioned spot. You see that there's a little bit of a trend of civilian administrators coming into law enforcement. So I didn't want to limit the pool of applicants. So we provided a wider pool by saying, this is not a necessity. The necessity was that you have law enforcement experience.
Okay, would it change what you would delegate to this position if it was a commissioned officer rather than a non-commissioned?
No, there is no requirement for an administrator to have a commission for an agency our size.
Right, okay, so it would be strictly the administrative.
It can be administrative, but it also will have a supervisory component to it.
Thank you.
I've got something to say, but I just want to make sure, Councilmember Steckler, your light was on and off. I just want to make sure that you didn't have anything. Okay.
You answered my question, but I'll make the comment. The question was, is a position like this, you must have done some research. What's it like in other cities of our size? Do they have this type of position? Would this be unique for us? Are we like the only city of our size to have a deputy chief? And you named up a couple of them already. So it sounds like you've done the homework. I guess, I tend to agree with, some of the comments that Councilmember Cavallari said, but then I kind of go back, and that's why I turn my button off, but I'll turn it back on. We said we want public safety to be a #1 concern and focus for us. And if we are stepping up and putting some of this money into this position, I don't like doing that because, it's like, here's a job. It's funded for 2 years. Don't know about after that, but here it is for 2 years. Well, I'm sure we could make that funding happen after 2 years if it's successful and a good contribution. So I tend to kind of go backwards and say, if I were to take the ARPA funds, it's a lot of money. It is 6%, but if it helps us to put more officers on the street in a better way and run a better police department that's providing more safety to our citizens, I have to support it, and I have to support you as the chief, as you saying this is what you think you need to accomplish that. So I'm in support of this.
Thank you. I did do a lot of homework on this, and I would say that there may be 2 other agencies in Snohomish County that do not have this position. And I can't speak for Briar, and I can't speak for Woodway. And the city of Woodway is not a comparable, nor is the city of Briar to the city of Mill Creek. And by no means am I trying, I'm just trying to provide the information to the council so they can be informed. But if you look at all the comparables that we would typically use as comparable cities that we might use in labor relations and those things, it is at least 1 other administrator, if not 2.
Thank you, Chief. My big question, and I think I hear you answering this, but for me, my big bottom line here is exactly like, how are the residents going to see this? How are they going to be affected? It sounds like you're saying that by having this position, we are going to be able to get those officers out on the streets more so that our residents are seeing them. Is that what?
That's the intent.
Yeah, because how are they going to be impacted and what are they going to see? Because ultimately, I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, we've already started to see an increase in presence in the city, right? I drive around frequently and I see a lot of red and blue lights out on the road. So that is an increased presence. By making this allocation and by moving forward with this resolution, we would be adding to that an officer shift, basically. And an officer that would be more present each shift. In the means of a sergeant who would also be providing that first level supervision in the field.
Perfect, thank you. And I see city manager has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I think you mentioned the importance of this from a compliance standpoint as well. That this position will, we have two policy manuals that need to be combined into one, and that's a huge lift. The city of Mill Creek is in a position where we're still rebuilding. I do understand, and if it were a different circumstance, I would agree on that. Maybe this is, keep in mind, this is a term limited position. And this is something that we do need on the administrative side to relieve the chief, a lot of those sergeants from what they're doing inside the office. A lot of it boils down to the number of calls that we get every day as well. If you look at that, comparatively speaking, it's not a tremendous amount of calls, but there are a fair amount enough to keep them busy. Now, with that said, I think the officers that we have currently, the ones that are in training, that will be more than sufficient to address the crime, address the need to police the streets of Mill Creek going forward. And this position, again, is term limited. It's going to handle a lot of key projects that we need handled in the next 2 years, including building our culture still. That's something that we need to work on across the city. And that's, yeah.
And I would also say that, you know, we talked about the junior officers that we're going to be having here at the department. We have a large number of officers that are just coming out of training. And it's going to be more critical for us to be making sure that they're comfortable in their positions, being given the right supervision that they need when they need it. And by freeing up our supervisors to be available for those junior officers, those officers that, you know, when we get into the middle of next year, it's going to be a large percentage of our workforce is going to have less than 6 months on the road.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't doubt the enthusiasm here, but we've been down this road before, honestly, if we're going to have this conversation. We've been down this road with the deputies, keep saying city manager, sorry, deputy police chief position. And I just haven't seen on the surface from, and that's why the council agreed not to fund it 2.5 years ago. I don't want to say bang for the buck, really the value for the position. I know it would be great to have all these things being accomplished, but I think that could be accomplished with an administrative lieutenant worked into the system somehow, because this money sunsets in 2 years. And we all know, if we're a fan of history, that this position ain't going away. We're stuck with it. So the fact that it's paid for 2 years is really kind of I don't want to say it's a disingenuous argument, but if we're going to utilize one-time money, let's train the staff that we have and look at this 2 years from now when we get to the budget, the biennium budget 2 years from now, and not try to end around this. And that's kind of how I view this. I've spoken out on this a couple of times, this deputy chief position, and I don't think a city our size needs it. I think administratively we can support a command structure from within, and I think we're actually doing it right now as we speak. So, and I know, and in fairness to you, Chief, I know it's a heavy workload. I know it's all fallen on you now and you need a number 2. There's no way I don't believe a non-commissioned person is going to come in here and do that job. It's just not going to happen. How are they going to delegate to commissioned officers? It's just one of those things that we're saying the right things here, but I just don't see it coming to fruition as everybody thinks here. And that's why it was taken out of the budget 2 years ago and then 3 years ago before that. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? everybody got really quiet. Do you have the motion available for us?
Right there on the screen.
Because now is the time when I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that the city council authorize the city manager to expend an amount not to exceed $360,000 for the salary and benefits for the limited term employee position of Deputy Director of Public Safety / Deputy Police Chief from ARPA funds received by the city.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Allison?
Yeah, I really worry that we can fund it for 2 years with these ARPA funds, and then we'll be in a position where we'll have to like raise the tax base, right, to pay for it. So I'm torn. I understand that. I hear the need. I'm just worried, 2 years from now, where are we going to be? We're going to be back to probably saying, oh, we can't afford that. And then it goes away. So, I mean, could you work a plan that included in those 2 years a way to make it manageable? I heard several projects that were mentioned that could be like a one-time only, like those 2 policies that need to be combined. That sounds like something that, once you get them combined, then it's just a maintenance of one of them. How much of the job are things that could just be taken care of, and then they're kind of in a good place and they're manageable after that? Is it like 50% of the job that you've carved out, or less?
There's always going to be more projects. One of the things that we've looked at is state accreditation.
Yeah.
To show that we're utilizing best practices and to possibly benefit the city through some other benefits from accreditation. So there's always going to be another project that is going to need to be done. And those 2 things, accreditation and the policy manual, are extremely heavy lifts. It's going to be a lot of time and dedication to get those things done, and working with the labor group as well. So there is an exorbitant amount of administrative work that is involved with running a city this size. And so the necessity for this position is very high. It was one of the things that we discussed in my hiring process.
Councilmember Duque, followed by Councilmember Paddock.
I want to just confirm that I absolutely agree with Councilmember Allison and Councilmember Cavallari about the worry about this coming from ARPA funding. I never find that ideal. But I also am optimistic that that staff and you as chief have heard our concerns. And I think sometimes when it comes to like giving grants to like organizations as they figure things out, just because I come from a nonprofit world, you're hoping to see like what's worked. So I'm hopeful that in this process, there's milestones that are made, feedback about what's happening, how has this been successful, potentially surveys within police staff about what has improved, what hasn't improved, and a realistic approach to what's working and what's not working. Because as of right now, I think it's clear that this is happening because of ARPA funding, and this ask is not possible with our current budget. And so I just wanted to flag that I'm optimistic that I believe that these milestones and figuring out how this is working and what can be improved and what this looks like is taken into account.
And it is a term time, right? So if we're unable to fund it, it goes away, but at least we will have benefited from the last 2 years of getting a policy manual completed and getting well on the way to accreditation, as well as the supervisory benefits that we're going to have for our young officers.
Councilmember Paddock was next.
Could we hear from the city manager? I think he has his hand up and.
That's okay. I could wait until somebody else had that.
Okay. So I also very much agree with what Councilmember Allison had to say, the concerns and Councilmember Cavallari, and I really respect Councilmember Cavallari's experience in this area. Very much so. I want to recognize that. When I applied for this position in the interviewing process, I had mentioned there were 3 or 4 things that would be key to how I would think about things. 1 was being data driven. 2 was benchmarks. 3 was what we heard from the community. And in reverse order, I seem to recall a presentation that the community, the comms team had put together. What did they hear from the community? Number 1 issue was public safety. Number 1. You presented some pretty compelling benchmarks. There are 2 cities in Snohomish County that do not have a similar structure. So that checks the benchmarking topic. And I think doing this for what's going to end up being 18 months is going to give us the data to be able to decide, do we want to keep this? And it's a hard stop. I mean, it will be up to us whether or not it continues. I know there's a bit of a, once it's there, it'll always be there. But this is temporary funding and we're the ones that make the decision on whether it will still be there at the end of this, but we will have data to make that decision. And then lastly, I think the fact that we have our chief and city leadership saying, this is where we would spend money, I would need to have a pretty compelling reason to say not to do that.
Councilmember Steckler.
I agree with a lot of the comments made by Councilmember Paddock, but just to kind of reiterate, for me, sitting here, listening to everybody, I'm going to, again, support this position. I'm going to vote for it. But based on these reasons, as I understand it, number 1, it's not a new position. We had this position before. So we had it, COVID came, things changed. The force really diminished significantly. The position did not get replaced. And now that we're in a rebuilding process, our chief wants to bring the position back that we had before. And when I look, and Councilmember Paddock said it too, this is a position that we see in so many, if not almost all of the other cities around us in some comparable size. This is not an unusual situation. That's the other thing that would stop me from supporting it. If this is something that we're the trendsetter for, but it's not. This is a standard operating procedure, except for a couple of cities. And I do also go back. My third reason is we asked the chief at the beginning of this, and the ARPA funds are being allocated. Is there anything else that he would want? Now, it'd probably be a lot easier if he come back and said, we use the ARPA funds to buy 2 police cruisers, because we would go, okay, good, we got 2 police cruisers. He's asking for a position. He's asking to fund a position for 2 years, which is something none of us really want to do, but it's clearly listed here on this document that this is a limited term employee position. They will be told that this is a sunset position. I've worked at companies where we do hire employees for sunset positions. They're clearly told this is a 2-year position. It's funded by X. When that's gone, I don't know if we're going to have a position again. The funding's going to be gone. So it's going to have to come from somewhere else. But that is clearly, as long as this is a limited term employee, this is a sunset position, I have no problem supporting it. If I didn't see that, I'd have a problem, because then we're going to feel like we hired this person, we kept him here for 2 years, and now there's a chance we might, have to let them go. Well, they know that coming in. They're coming in to get the experience. They're coming in to do the job. And at the end of that, if they do a really good job, we're not going to let them go. We're going to find a way. The chief's going to find a way to keep them within the budget that the council will approve. So I don't, when I ask a leadership position, what do you need to be successful? And they come back and they tell us this. I mean, I respect the chief. I respect Councilmember Cavallari because he's in law enforcement his career. I don't know anything about how to run a police department. I'm just looking at these other facts that I just mentioned, why I would want to support this. So I just wanted to kind of create that list. Thank you.
City Manager.
This discussion started at the very beginning about, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, the policy manual and what it would cost to fund a consultant for 2 years, which, if I'm not mistaken, it's roughly about 400,000 on a consulting basis, purely just from a consultant's fee. The discussion started because our city attorney explicitly emphasized the liability that we are facing right now. And it's not, this is the conversation I had. Of course, we have been in this position for many years with these two different manuals. And so it is something we need to handle. Is it critical at this point? Arguably, yes. I think I've had two or three discussions reminding me how important it is. That's how the discussion started about this manual. Given the cost of a consultant, we evolved that discussion into a position that would actually handle not only that policy manual, but other tasks that would build our culture, which is already happening right now. And again, administratively, using a seasoned term limited employee to assist the chief in training these new recruits and all the other officers going forward, putting together a study plan, possibly changing the way we police the city of Mill Creek, accreditation. We have a lot of, I'm not going to name off all the projects that we're working on, but yeah.
And the last thing that I'd like to add is that, sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
The last thing that I would like to add is that this is the #1 major recommendation for the Center for Police Safety Management in a CPSM study that we did in 2015. And so other agencies have come in to assess how effective we are as a police department, and they provided us with recommendations. And like I said, this is the #1 major recommendation from their system. So as well as the Lee map, which WASPIC will come in and do for us again if necessary to get us on the right path. But I think we're gaining a lot of momentum right now and heading down the right path. And this would be just another push in that direction.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Cavallari has something else. Then I have something to say.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of quick points, just for clarity's sake. When we give examples to what Councilmember Paddock and Councilmember Steckler were talking about the model of having like a #2 or second in command. Most cities and Snohomish don't have a chief and a deputy chief. They have what we're both talking about, a chief, administrative lieutenant, or a captain, one or the other, right? So we can agree that yes, you need a #2, and I kind of get that. I don't think there's more people in the bag for public safety that I know in my circle than me. I mean, I completely get it. I think we have just different vessels of getting there. And if we were going to go down this path at this point in time, my hope was to do it internally. We've been talking about Lee maps. We've been talking about accreditation and policies ever since I've sat on this dais now 8 years, and still with 2 deputy chiefs, nothing. So those are the reasons for my hesitation. I just don't want to, if we have an opportunity with $350K to train our frontline supervisors now to be leaders, lieutenants, deputy chiefs, whatever we're going to call them in the future, that is how I would prefer to go down this road. Thanks.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you. I appreciate your presentation, Chief. I personally think I'm in favor of this evening. When you originally had mentioned this position, my concern had been, how are we going to fund it in the future? And by making this a term that has a sunset, we're basically taking care of that. Now, I do acknowledge what Councilmember Cavallari is saying, that quite often we will say that, and then next thing you know, it creeps in to something that stays here forever and ever. But I do agree with Councilmember Paddock's assessment that this position having a term limit, we're going to be able to gather the data and look at how it does help us and how Are we seeing an impact? Are the residents seeing an impact that they want to see on this? And then it's coming back to us to make this decision. And if we don't see the data that we would like to see that it's having an impact, then we don't have to continue it. We can say it's not doing what we thought it would do. So, also, really for me, one of the bottom lines is freeing up our officers to be out there on the street, because public safety is one of the top concerns that I have, and it's one of the top concerns that I hear. And I want to make sure that we have boots on the ground out there. And if this is going to help free up more boots on the ground to be patrolling the streets and be actively out, watching the neighborhoods, out on the trails, because I think we've mentioned being able to have possibly some officers on bikes. I think this is going to go a long way for our community. So I'm going to be in favor of this evening for those reasons. If nobody else has anything else to say, I will call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, the motion passes 5 yes and 1 abstention. I had to do the math in my head that Brian's not here. Thank you.
Yes, can you tell me who abstained?
Councilmember Cavallari abstained.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I keep forgetting it's me that moves the meeting forward tonight. Now, next up on the agenda, we have a study session with our city engineer and surface water program coordinator, Frank Reinhardt and Angela Bolton, for the 2023 surface water management plan.
Good evening, council. Good evening, staff. And to anyone listening at home, welcome and thank you for your attention. My name is Angela Bolton. I'm the stormwater coordinator for the city. And in case you don't know what that is, I'll be happy to tell you more about it. So tonight I'm coming to you to talk about the utilities, the surface water utility. So as you are no doubt aware, the city does not have its own drinking water or wastewater utility. So this is the extent of the city's utility. But there are a lot of things behind the stormwater program. And I came to this group last fall with some explanation of what all the components of the program are. So I'd just like to update you tonight on where we are with progressing forward with the responsibilities under the state's permit that we are required to uphold. So the surface water utility is directed and mandated through the Department of Ecology's Phase 2 permit and the requirements that that establishes. So the utility has responsibility and objectives under that. I wanted to talk tonight about the progress we've made since my arrival here at the end of 2021. A little over a year now, time flies. And then I didn't necessarily want to touch on utility enterprise funding and fund uses, but I'm happy to entertain any questions when we get to the end of my presentation. So as a refresher, the Western Washington Phase 2 permit programs present wide-ranging obligations for a city-operated utility. It's not merely confined to operations and maintenance anymore, although that's an expanding element of requirements under the permit. The permit also includes directives for administration and financial management, public education and outreach, strategic long-term planning, public stewardship and volunteering, water quality sampling and tracking, pollutant source identification and elimination, and redevelopment oversight and permitting. And then, of course, documentation of all permit obligations, meaning everything I just mentioned. So the surface water utilities responsibilities include implementing the stormwater development standards and pollution mitigation requirements for private properties within the city. So we have addressed this through the adoption of code language that is guidance for which is presented to us through the state's stormwater manual. Further responsibilities include that we need to operate and maintain all existing public conveyances for stormwater, which means pipes, ditches, catch basins, and operate and maintain all existing publicly owned facilities such as stormwater vaults and stormwater ponds. We are obligated to build and or replace these conveyance and facilities to meet the city's needs and or regulatory requirements. And that will feature into a comment I'll make later on. We are responsible for facilitating public education and stewardship opportunities and complying with all additional data collection, monitoring, and reporting requirements established by the permit. So the objectives for the utility are primarily to limit the discharge of contaminants into the municipal storm sewer system and into the surface waters that those systems drain into. We are charged with preventing erosion and soil loss and related sediment impacts to natural receiving waters, which for us is North Creek and its ultimate outfall into the Sammamish. Our objective is also to eliminate or mitigate community municipal water pollution, as I mentioned. Protect water quality, the existing water quality character of natural receiving waters and improve it so it meets state standards. And we are responsible and aim all our activities to rehabilitate and improve natural streams and water resource areas, such as wetlands from impacts by past human activity. And this is particularly important in Mill Creek, where development over several years has reduced wetlands. The city of Mill Creek is not unique in this respect, but it's something that the permit requires us to be mindful of. So the status of the NPDES permit is we are currently operating under the third 5-year permit that was issued in 2019. So this permit required implementation of new and or revised city MS4 requirements and policies. And the overall magnitude of the changes that were required of us by adopting this or by being issued this permit were not as substantial as previous, but still significant with respect to strategic planning, increased operations and maintenance, increased public involvement and other elements. And currently, the Department of Ecology has directed the city attention to compliance issues with permit requirements, which necessitated rebuilding the program in 2021 in response to the ecology's non-compliance letter to the city in 2020. So at this point, we are responsible for submitting an annual report summarizing our activities throughout the last year, which go some distance toward addressing those non-compliance issues from 2 years ago, and our return to compliance, which is due at the end of March. So these are the 8 elements that are defined for the stormwater management program. And what I've done here, and you might remember this slide from my previous presentation, is I've tried to present where we've had, when the permit was issued in the past to the city of Mill Creek. And I've highlighted these 3 legs of the permit: stormwater planning, MS4 mapping and documentation, and source control program for existing development, because these were new in our current permit. And these will be expanded upon in our estimation for the permit reissuance that starts next year. So they are already The council actually has an opportunity to weigh in on this final column of check marks, as the Department of Ecology is currently seeking feedback on preliminary draft language for permit reissuance as related to new sections being proposed, one of which is stormwater controls for priority developed areas. So you can submit informal comment up until midnight on March 23rd. And for further instruction and guidance on this, you can visit the Department of Ecology's Municipal Stormwater Reissuance page for further detail, or just email me. Okay, so let's start with that element of source control program for existing development. So these 3 blue arrows you see were what I directed your attention to last fall, because they were primarily concerned with the adoption of new language that would give us the wherewithal to pursue the other elements of this special condition of the permit, which and those new elements are indicated with the green leaves. So what we've been working on in the last year, or I should say, maybe I have been working on since, like my counterpart in Anacortes, this is kind of a one-woman show at this point. And I should give a little shout out to Diane, because she's offered to be very helpful, as have my counterparts in all the jurisdictions around Puget Sound. So what we're doing for source control, and what we were charged with doing, was creating some operational best management practices, in addition to what the permit requires of us for structural control and for behavioral. To prevent illicit discharges and violations of surface water standards. So as part of that, we were required to establish an inventory that identifies publicly and privately owned commercial, institutional, industrial sites that have the potential to generate pollutants, and then implement an inspection program that requires us to inspect 20% of all of these inventoried sites every year. I should note that the city of Bothell, who has 3 people doing my job, is now hiring for a 4th person to specifically oversee this exact portion of the stormwater program. So this gives you an idea of some of what's required. What I've presented to you here is just a snapshot of a few businesses organized geographically. And these are all where the other businesses that are located where the Rusty Pelican is. And so the program requires us to initially reach out through a business letter, and the draft of which you see here. It's just a form letter that you can do through a mail merge, and send it to a point of contact at each of these businesses. The inventory was created by doing a search through the Department of Commerce and whittling those down and refining those to businesses that are physically located in Mill Creek. And we come up with a preliminary list of slightly less than 400. And then we begin the inspection process by initially making contact through this letter, and then scheduling a time to go visit and primarily present them with some technical guidance. So how to keep, for example, their dumpster area clean and controlled. How to make sure that they are not contributing contaminants to the MS4 unwittingly through what they may dispose of, what others may leave around the building by not practicing good hygiene. It's really about good housekeeping. Then we come to maintenance and operations. Now, I had said that the permit didn't initially, the current permit and the future permits have moved beyond just what you would have normally considered maintenance and operations. but they are very much based on maintenance and operations. So what I explained last time is still highlighted, but I've added these green leaves to indicate that we were required to implement a program to annually inspect all municipally owned or operated stormwater treatment and control BMP facilities and take appropriate maintenance actions. We were required to inspect all of these every 2 years, which means that this is an ongoing program, and clean those catch basins if necessary, which means that if they have meet a certain level of about 60% of the sump depth being full, then they are meet the threshold for being scheduled to be cleaned. And I know that at least 2 of you have looked at the social media that we put together to describe this program. Thank you, Councilperson Duque and Councilperson Paddock. What you see here is on the city's webpage. So this is an excerpt of all of the catch basins throughout the city of Mill Creek. And the dark purple indicates what the city is responsible for. What you see off to the right is a snapshot of one of the contract personnel who is measuring the depth of the sediment that is in that catch basin. We have to use contract personnel because the level of work that needs to be done to meet that 2-year threshold for it being inspected and cleaned is rather steep, given the city's current staffing limitations. So what we're doing to address that is we're utilizing GIS mobile applications for this maintenance and operations element. So we've used a mobile tablet and we've issued the contract inspectors have these, and we've given them a GIS license temporarily. That's allowed over 1,700 catch basin inspections to be completed to date. And actually, when I put this into the system 2 days ago, that was the number, but it's since approaching 1,900. So the other thing that we have built is a dashboard that gives me a real-time readout of the inspections as they are completed and lets me know through queries through these field maps and survey 123 applications that have not only facilitated data collection, they'll also allow me to do some level of analysis. So functions within those 2 applications, field maps and survey 123, allows the contractor to generate estimates of the material to be removed. Furthermore, the applications also can be used to plan the most efficient routes and schedules for removal, which is an element of the cleaning and inspection program that you didn't see last fall when I came to you for authorization for just this inspection portion of our maintenance and operations requirements. So things like that GIS application and those programs can be used for something that is another element and a very important one of the permit. So we are obligated to prepare a stormwater management action plan that's focused on one waterway, priority basin, as they call it in the language of the permit. And because of other limitations within the city and watershed, the nature of the watersheds and the property ownership and management, we have landed on Mill Creek. And one other reason for Mill Creek itself as being a priority basin is through the water quality sampling that has been done since North Creek was judged to be in need of a total maximum daily load requirement, is water quality sampling to monitor for fecal coliforms and specifically E. coli, which you might be familiar with from as a constituent that's heavily monitored for and regulated for your drinking water. But E. coli is a microbe that can be found in natural water systems as a result of escaping the GI tract of warm-blooded animals. So pet waste can be a particular source of E. coli. But in current conversations with my counterparts around Western Washington, an increasing focus of concern is homeless encampments and their potential to contribute to water quality standards that lead us to exceed the levels that would keep us in compliance. So in terms of creating the stormwater management action plan for Mill Creek itself, we can use tools like that GIS, not just to identify areas that we can target for improved stormwater controls, green infrastructure, low impact development structures, and not just structurally, but behaviorally and operationally. And as you've seen through your interest in following social media and in driving you to look at the city's website, that presents the platform for some public education and outreach that we can use to engage with members of that Mill Creek sub-basin, to talk to them about what's going on and what the city would like to plan and how we can work with them to really get some water quality improvements and do it in a collaborative way. So I would just like to remind you of the 8 legs of the current permit. And there's actually some that I didn't mention initially because they aren't necessarily applicable to every single jurisdiction. But these first 8 certainly are, which is the stormwater planning. And again, the ones that I've highlighted, the illicit discharge detection and elimination, pollution prevention for municipal operations and maintenance, and source control. So these are just 4 of them that I've touched on this evening. Again, the elements of the stormwater management program and your reminder of your opportunity to participate in how this process moves forward and what the state chooses to impose upon jurisdictions to improve water quality and our level of service from our stormwater utilities across Western Washington. And I've added the little people at the bottom, both to ask for your questions and as a reminder that what really drives stormwater management and water quality is us. And we can build things and we can deploy software and tools, but at the end of the day, it is us practicing stewardship and taking ownership of the place where we live. So thank you very much for your time. And in summary, I would like to say that it is the combination of these development regulations and codes that we still will need to implement moving forward. Development regulations and codes work in feedback with the 3 major elements of managing the utility: operations and maintenance, capital asset programs and projects, and regulatory permit compliance. So these developments, codes, and regulations promote the program sustainability and the long-term health of our surface and groundwaters. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the stormwater program.
Thank you, Angela. Do I have any questions? Councilmember Allison and then Councilmember Duque.
I just want to say I'm all for clean water. Are there things that citizens can do to, reduce the silt that goes into those catch basins?
Yes. They can sweep, they can mulch, and mulch some more. The more rough surfaces you create on your own property through mulching your own leaves and wood chips, slow the movement of water across your property, and sweeping those paved surfaces will onto your lawn will also help keep sediment materials from going into the catch basins.
Another good reason for that improved street sweeper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Oh, thank you for giving me that segue. So that regenerative air sweeper, there are as I mentioned, my counterparts around the state, we meet regularly through Zoom meetings to talk about studies that have been funded and to recommend studies and identify additional areas of inquiry that would be useful for management. And one element that has been a strong focus is the role of street sweeping and how really critical it is. Particularly given the identification of a compound called 6-PPD or 6-PPDQ, which is a chemical term about this long. But what it is a derivative of tire wear particles that break down in an aqueous situation and they can cling to particulate material. And they are toxic to coho in particular, but also to some other salmonids, not quite to the same extent. And street sweeping is really getting a lot of attention as a way to control that contaminant moving into surface water systems. There was just, let's see, a consultant presented a report about 3 weeks ago that looked at a number of cities across Western Washington and what they've seen by staggering or moving their street sweeping and looking at what happens if we do it monthly, what happens if we do it bi-weekly, what happens if we only do it, once every quarter. So it's getting a lot of attention, and we are involved in conversations. There's always representatives from the Washington Department of Transportation. As you might imagine, they're particularly concerned with this, but also representatives from the tire industry, because this is an issue all up and down the West Coast. It is not just Washington State, it is California, it is Oregon. And the other element of street sweeping that also gets back to what you can do on your own property is something that I was very focused on a message I was very focused on getting across during the Mill Creek Festival, which is what is the largest source of contaminant to Puget Sound? Close, think a little bigger. It's your car. It is not just washing your car, because washing your car will dislodge and send into the system dirts, oils, greases. But the other thing it liberates is those tire wear particles and brake dust. So this is one of the big differences between stormwater and wastewater. Is stormwater is a huge source of metal contaminants. And copper in particular, which used to be a large component for brake manufacturers, is again, particularly toxic to fish. California was in the forefront about trying to limit the manufacture of brakes so that copper was not used. But things take a long time to phase out. So that is another big motivation for getting a top of the line street sweeper. And thank you so much for authorizing that purchase. The fish, thank you. Are there other questions?
Councilmember Duque had a question.
Yes, I really appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate your comment, because I think when we're thinking about presentations for what we need to purchase, or we need to also think like holistically about like, are there other departments or other connections that we can make that would be a good fit? So, having that talking point when we were talking about the street sweeper is very helpful. And actually, my segue into talking points, having this information and having it and sharing it with us in your presentation about what you did, but being able to work with our marketing communications department and figuring out what's that language and what are those talking points for us as city council members, as representatives of the city, to be able to share, I think is incredibly helpful. I appreciated all of the social media posts specifically, and that's what I wanted to share. My HOA community, we've been working on, because we have to manage our own, we have to manage all of it. It's a whole specific thing about our area, and we have private streets. And so we actually had a company come out and look at our catch basins and all that kind of stuff. And so when I saw on my street, because I happened to be on a public city street, the same thing happening, I got really excited. And then I saw the Facebook post, and I made sure to share it with my fellow board members on the HOA committee, on the HOA, and then of course with our community to talk about the importance and, you know, all of this. So I would encourage you, besides creating for us, you know, a one pager on talking points or an email about what's that kind of language we could share. And even with our board, our advisory boards that we have, an opportunity to reach out to HOAs and their newsletters. And because I know I saw social media, not everyone has it, but generally if there's still a written newsletter, or if there's a digital one or their websites, having this kind of information and keeping them up to date. I know you have a lot on your plate. I'm not trying to add something else, but being able to condense this information and being able to just share it out with them, I think it was great. And then I wanted to say thank you for all of your work on ed events. I always, I appreciate it. And I think those are good opportunities for those touchstones of talking to people about it. So in any way that we can help. So thank you for a great job.
Thank you. And I would just like to thank the council for being interested in this topic and recognizing that stormwater management really touches on everything that the city does. And thank you for being my ambassadors for the program.
Thank you, Angela. Did anybody else have any questions? No, and thank you so much for your presentation. It's nice to have you come and talk to us about what you're doing with what we're doing with stormwater and kind of why it's so important, and get that news out to everyone so that they can be just as passionate, because we really care about it. And it's nice to see your passion for it as well. So thank
Well,
you.
I'm always happy to come back and talk to you about other aspects of the program. So I remain open to invitations, maybe not next week, but certainly in the future. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Perfect. Thank you. That is catching everybody today. There's a theme going on over there. All right, now we're going to move on next to the consent agenda. I filled in for Mayor Holsclaw, and Councilmember Cavallari was on the audit committee. Do I have a motion, or are there any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions. And do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Do we need to announce the payments?
Oh, yeah. Do the payroll and benefit ACH payments to the amount of $229,795.43. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions. And do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstentions? Any nays? Motion passes. Next, we're moving on to reports. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Two meetings that I had recently. One was Director Todd and I had a meeting with Snow Isle. The Director of Snow Isle, Lois Langer Thompson, and one of her colleagues. The library system is looking towards the future. I kind of alluded to that in the recent presentation, that they really want to find out kind of what the citizens of Mill Creek are looking for in terms of services, not just library, but things that that they need. And then they want to take that information down the road and consider that in their future projects on how they're going to serve the city of Mill Creek and adjacent communities through the library system. They have, I think, 5 to 6 projects ahead of them already with different cities. And so those discussions will commence probably later in the year. So we'll keep ties with them and then continue these discussions. So we'll take any questions with that. Another meeting we had is with Stowe County. What I didn't know is that Snow County makes about 10% of our state's population. But the number of heroin deaths range, I think, around 18%. As you know, we are receiving, well, we will be receiving a small amount from the opioid settlement. We'll have more discussion on this moving forward, but the meeting just entailed some very preliminary discussions on bringing members of representatives from different cities to potentially combine these funds in some way that would add value to fighting the drug problem across Snow County. They have some ideas, but they're just looking for discussion right now and open to new ideas as well. So as these discussions progress, we'll continue to update council on kind of where they're at with that. And then as of now, I'm not sure how, I think the funds are going to start to come in fairly soon. So my guess would be that we would probably just receive the funds and then decide how we're going to use those down the road, whether it's internally or across.
But what are we talking, Martin? $1 million, $5 million?
10,000 a year for 17 years or something like that. For us, Snow County has about 700,000. They're looking to double that to about 1.3, I think. They may potentially get more federal funding to match that to over 2.5 roughly. So whether it's equipment programs, they don't know. They have an idea, like 6 different ideas of kind of how they're going to propose it to be spent or used, but nothing's set in stone, and we'll get more information as we move forward. But for us, yes, it's 10,000 a year. And with that, I'll take any questions. No? Thank you. That's it. And then I'll pass it off to our finance director, who will provide our monthly financial report.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Vignal, council members, and to city staff, and also people joining us virtually. I am pleased to present the 2021-2022 biannual, our operations in comparison with our 2021-2022 adjusted budget. So this report was presented to the Finance Committee last night, and their comments have been incorporated in my presentation tonight. I'm only highlighting the notable items of the report. But before that, I'd like to discuss the environment in 21-22 to give us a better perspective of what we're seeing in the financials. So coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a lot of impacts in our economy. We had supply chain disruptions, we had labor shortage, which caused higher prices. We also saw some phenomenon change in behavior, such as the work from home, as well as a lot of our baby boomer retirements. And so the COVID-19 and the higher prices was also disrupted by the Ukraine and Russian conflict. And so our CPI in Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue area outpaced the national average. So we started with 2.5 in 2019. And we were up to now 9% in 2022. The US average was about 8%. And so to manage that, to manage the inflation, the the Federal Open Market Committee have started to raise the federal funds rate from a quarter percent in March of 2022 to now 4.25 to 5.5 at the end of December. So keep in mind those environmental factors. In our general fund, we ended up with a 2.2 increase in resources, and that's a factor of two things, our revenue and our expenditures. Our revenues are 1.3% or about 408,000 above budget. And so, and those are because our sales tax. So our sales tax, our intergovernmental or grants and our miscellaneous are up, but our licenses, our charges for services and our fines were down. Looking at our sales tax, so this data is an annual data, and this is data collection for the December 21 through November of every year. The collections of taxes are a month behind. Consistently through the 4 years, our biggest categories are construction, retail trade, accommodation, and food services. And so based on this data, our 2022 is up by 1.3% or 52,000 above the 2021 collections, but it is 9.5 compared to our 2020. And majority of that increase we can attribute to the inflation factor rather than actual growth or volume of transactions. The retail trade category, which includes the increases in food and beverage, gas stations and convenience store sales, those are reported there. And under the accommodation and food services, those are where our restaurants are mostly reported. Now our construction and also the retail, the rental and leasing have declined, and this is consistent with the housing slowdown in 2022. Now, majority of our sales tax are coming from the outside. They're not really generated in the city of Mill Creek. Most of them are coming from out of city of Mill Creek and out of state. Our next biggest one are grants and intergovernmental, we collected $85,000 more. And this is because we received a Department of Commerce grant for the Mill Creek Boulevard corridor, about $53,000. And we also collected higher liquor excise tax. Our charges for goods and services that fell short by about 14%. Our passport processing fees posted 38.5% above the projected amount. And we processed about 6,514 passports in 2021, and that jumped to 817 in 2022. So I'm talking about the revenues. Yeah. I switched back after discussing sales tax and now going back to so we could see the line for charges for services. Yeah, do you see 2.2 million? Yes. So where was I? Okay, so our fines are also under collected, about $116,000. But our miscellaneous revenue will offset that. We collected 230. And again, this is because we earned a lot in our investments. So remember, with the federal rate going up, our investments are going up as well. So the county pool, where we have most of our investments that earned the rate in December of 2021 was 0.09%. And at the end of 2022, that went up to 4.12%. Are there any questions at this point?
What falls under the charges for services?
Excuse me?
What all falls under charges for services?
So charges for services, we will have our passport processing fees in there, our law enforcement services, our plan review and recreation fees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then the second component that cost are increased in resources is our general fund savings. And that's a $1.8 million savings, and most of them is coming from 1.5 million is from personnel cost due to vacancies and the pending police guild collective bargaining retro salary adjustments. So that has not yet been concluded. So we expect that there will be a future budget adjustment related to that when that gets settled. Also, we have savings of about 219,000 from maintenance and operating costs. Some of the cost or savings in this category are coming from our legal services. Council member Steckler wanted us to show a graph of the savings that relate to our legal expenses. So the 4-year history is presented to you tonight. So in 2021, we were spending about 1.8 million in legal services. That we brought that down by about 400,000 in 2021, and again another 300,000 in 2022. We also have deferred capital expenses that contributed to the savings. Now, looking at the expenditures on a department by department basis, we have the finance, city clerk, and community development. Most of them are below. I think the lines are different, so I'm just going to highlight the ones that are in this graph. The legislative, our IT, our fire, and the public works department are all overspent. But the other ones are offset because of the big salary savings that we have seen in those other departments. So for legislative, the legislative line where we see 106% greater than the 6.3% above the budget. That's due to the professional services from the recruitment of the city manager position. In the IT, we have about 15.1% above budget, and that's from the expenses on technology to facilitate remote work and virtual access. Under the fire, it's a 1.3% increase in expenses, and that includes the 64,000 in closing costs for the fire station. And the public works, it's a combination of the salary adjustment and the allocation of some of the positions that were not in line with the budget. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. So moving on to our special revenue funds, we have all of these funds under that category. And I'm just going to point out 2 items here. We have the City Streets Fund, which collected revenue of 1.1%. Above the budget, but that includes a $50,000 transfer from the general fund because their cash came out negative, and so we had to supplement their cash, and that's the transfer. And then their expenses are low. They came right around their budget, and then the City Hall North, we have revenues at 3.4% above the budget, and that's due to the increased leases, and their expenditures are below by about 17%, and that's due to deferred maintenance and capital expenses. And then our capital projects fund, the biggest item here is the retail excise tax. So our retail excise tax are the tax on real estate or real property sale. So beginning in 2020, the state implemented a graduated tax rate for REIT. However, the portion for the city remained at 0.5%. But over the 2-year period, we have about 740 property sales in the city of Mill Creek. And that includes, I couldn't figure out quite the average because it's 740 data lines that I had to look at, but there were several notable big sales during that time period, above 2 million. So one of them was the Montero Apartments along Dumas Road that sold for 55 million. Thomas Lake Center at 132nd Street Southeast was also sold at 31 million. And then a residential development transferred from Crestview to LLC to RM Homes. That's along 23rd Drive Southeast and 133rd Place Southeast. And there were two above 2 million. There's a self-storage, and the Shell station also transferred ownership. So those all contributed to a higher excise tax, about 1.2 million more. And then our capital improvement expenditures to date are relatively low overall due to staff availability to work on the projects. The timing and the progress of capital projects have been impacted. And then the last is our surface water utility. We collected 1.5% more in fees. And also due to the challenges in capital projects, that is also underspent by 2.2 million. Are there any questions? That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like there are no questions, so thank you so much for such a good presentation. She didn't drop the mic. Okay, oh, next up was on reports then is the chief.
Thank you, council, again, to talk with you tonight. I wanted to mention the event that we had here last week regarding the Meet the Chief open house that we had. I wanted to thank, first of all, Scott and Jody for the excellent work they did in communications and marketing and helping us with this event. I appreciate your help tremendously. Also, Barb Heidel for her work as a volunteer. She has been doing this for the police department for several years. And without her, I think that myself and Sergeant Fauch would be lost. And so I appreciate her help with that. This was a great event. I appreciate the council members that were able to attend. I know that your schedules are very busy, and so thank you for being here. But we had several members from the community, and I want to say that, Scott, we were thinking around 55 was the number that came through the building that night. Several that we knew, several that we didn't know, and we made a lot of connections. So it was a really great event. We had a police car, we had a police motorcycle available for photographs. We had a lot of children that came through with their parents. Actually, one stopped and took a picture on the motorcycle and thought it was so neat. He had to have his parents take him home and come back with a thank you card. So it was really kind of a great experience for all of us. And a special shout out to Councilmember Duque for suiting up in the tactical gear and utilized by our officers. And it turned out to be a great picture. So it was a lot of fun. But no, thank you to everybody who helped put that on for us. And I appreciate that. And it was a great event. So I do have another report for today. Today was a really great success for the police department. We collaborated with LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, and we went out and contacted several encampments along North Creek Trail. We've received several comments regarding North Creek Trail and some of the encampments that are popping up around. Hello? Okay. Several of the encampments that are popping up along the trail. It's somewhat of a difficult process to go back and contact these encampments, that most of them cannot be seen from the trail. But the remnants of the encampments can be seen, the garbage and refuse that is kind of along the trail that's being cleaned up by the public works staff. And so we don't see it as much, but we can definitely tell that there's things going on. So we took the time and went back with, working with Public Works Director Mike Todd and Public Works Supervisor Keegan and his crew. We were able to locate several camps. We were able to post 4 camps that are actually on public property today. And we're working with identifying a vendor who can come, a contractor that can maybe come and help us remove those camps as early as the 16th of this next month. So we're working on that. We also contacted several individuals. I want to say at least 4 that were able to refer to services. And so LEAD was able to take their hand and walk them over to a coffee shop where they sat and had some discussions. And we're hoping that those individuals will be able to follow through with the program. and move forward in finding the resources that they need. So I consider that a huge win for the city of Mill Creek and the police department, Public Works Department, and we're just going to continue down this path until we find some type of resolution and do the best we can to find services for these folks. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Councilmember Allison.
So you mentioned that several of those camps were on public property. So those were the ones that you approached the people. What about, did you say there were some on private property too?
There are some on private property and working with advanced trespass notices to help with those situations.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? No, thank you, Chief. Thank you for this update. It's nice to have a success story from you today and to hear what course you're taking so that we can go out and tell everyone that there is action being taken. So thank you.
And before I forget, I also want to thank the officers that were involved in that process. The Officer Saga, who's our SRO at Jackson High School, really took the lead on this today. And so he helped tremendously, which is outside of his normal duties, but definitely understands the concern that we have. And also officers Corporal Eikenberry and Officer Smith, who is a new officer in training rotation. So it's a great experience for her as well. So I'd like to thank them for their participation.
Thank you, Chief. Next up, we have mayor and council reports. So starting off, thank you, Chief, for the update on the event held here. I apologize, I was not able to get out here for such a great event. I heard wonderful things from other council members. I was knee deep in Girl Scout cookies that whole day, so it was not in the cards for me to get here. Also, I went out this weekend and the chamber had asked for me to come out and do a ribbon cutting to celebrate Code Ninjas for their 3-year anniversary. They wanted to do something special for them because they actually opened 3 years ago and a week later we had COVID. And as you can imagine, that kind of put a damper on their grand opening events. And so we went out and celebrated them. It's such a great resource to our young people to have a place where they can go learn about coding and just see them. They had an event and just made sure that they were giving awards to their staff and to the kids that are coming in and learning. And so it was a really great event and I really enjoyed it. And looking at what else did I want to say? I already discussed HB 1110. That was on my list. The legislative committee did meet. We are going to start bringing forth updates on a weekly basis starting next week. But I did want to personally flag something that I thought council may want to hear about because there is a bill called HB 1650. And it is a bill that is talking about requiring that I had it up here and then I took it down. It's about cannabis and requiring a vote to continue banning cannabis sales in the city and also not allowing you to add any other requirements on those businesses than you would do a regular business in the city. So that's something that we may want to keep our eyes on because that may affect us here. So I just wanted to flag that for you all to take a look at. And that's it. So next, now I forget where Brian usually starts. Councilmember Cavallari?
No report.
Councilmember Steckler?
I've got a few things, but first of all, in regards to that cannabis vote, it'd be great as that comes down. Thank you for making us aware of that. Can we get some information on that to help us with, making an educated vote on either continuing this or changing that, whatever is best. I really appreciate that we get some information on that. Second, I wanted to just announce and remind everybody who can, anyone in the public is welcome, but the unveiling of the Fred Philbrook Memorial Bench will be this Saturday at, I believe it's 11 a.m. in the Forum in Town Center. So like I say, everyone is welcome to come celebrate Fred, and his wife, Nola, will be there as well. The other thing, I'm pretty sure this only happened to me and nobody else, but in mid-February, I got this letter from the Office of the Treasurer, and it was regarding my property taxes. And I noticed that probably again, it only happened to me and nobody else, but mine went up significantly. And I'm being very facetious because I know everyone went up significantly. We had a number of levies that came into action along with the fire, as well as a couple of other issues that were in there. And one thing that I found, and I think this might be an opportunity for us, we have a number of seniors on a fixed income, which always, whenever you have increased property taxes, that's a challenge. And from the marketing department, I contacted the Office of the Treasurer, and they were extremely helpful at educating me on the processes and surrounding fixed income individuals over the age of 65 who make less than 55,000. There's a heck of an opportunity there for people to get some relief. And it's a very simple process. And I'm looking at Scott right now because poor guy's in the room. If there was a way for us to collect those steps and maybe post them on our website, I don't know if that's legal. I don't know if that's possible, but it's like four easy steps and you've got the information you need to put in a request. It would sure be nice because I know it is very difficult to get into the treasurer's office, get through the phone link. And for a lot of the seniors, that could probably be something they couldn't do. But anything we could do to help our senior fixed income seniors as they face an average 28% overall property tax increase for people it's a tough nut. And unfortunately, our values have gone up so much that's fed to that bigger number as well. It is what it is. And we all knew that with open eyes when we made the votes on it. But I'm just thinking again, if there's anything the city could do to really help the fixed income seniors over the age of 65 that make less than $54,000, that's a lot of them. And Scott, you have your hand up.
Let you know, we are in the midst of working on some communication pieces with Irvina and Martin to educate everybody in the city on how this is working, who's involved, and resources like that.
I'm sorry, we cannot hear. Can you go to a microphone?
Thank you, Joe. Just want to let you know, we are working on a project with Irmina and Martin and working on web pages, communication pieces, social media, all the different things that we do, educating people on the taxes. Because as I remember, Irmina, I think you said in Mill Creek, what was it, 30% increase? Yeah, huge, right? All of us were like, wow. So we just want to educate everybody and give them the tools and resources from Snohomish County and really break it down so it's understandable. And fixed income was one of the topics that we're really trying to break it down and give them resources. So we're on it.
That is great minds thinking alike. Yes. Educating them, not just where they came from, but what resources are out there to get some relief from it. And just a little bit of relief would be a great win to our seniors. So thank you. I'm glad you're way ahead of me and I'll stop talking as of right now.
Councilmember Allison,
No reports.
Councilmember Decay.
So no, thank you for the wonderful Meet the Chief event. I had a really great time. Not just because I was weighed down by a lot of equipment, but also because I had the opportunity to speak to our officers and hear and understand what equipment is needed. And I appreciate it because it's not just about having a motorcycle for photos, although that's huge. I have many photos of my little Diego on it, and it's his favorite thing. But because you get to see, what equipment is used and understanding, how we protect our police officers. I think that's very valuable, and I recommend anyone having that. Sometimes it's a very serious moment when you get to see that kind of that equipment and what does it mean, but also talk to everyone there and why, what questions we all had. I was kind of trying to be nosy and listening to what people were asking and what were their and what they were concerned about. So it was helpful to hear that. And it was a great date night because that's what it turned out to be for me. So thank you for that. Not as part of my role as a Mill Creek City Council member, but I think I've spoken about this before. I attend the SNOCO, not the Arts Commission, but the community organization where they have all different in Snohomish County, all the different artists, groups, nonprofits, organizations, even city staff members, because there are cities that have full-time staff members that are working on arts, which is fantastic, of course, to hear about all their updates. And so there's just a couple, there's just wanting to flag just a couple quick things for you. From the SNOCO, what they're working on. There's the arts and culture grants available. There's arts commission meetings. I'm going to send this all to the Arts and Beautification Board. But what I really wanted to flag, and I think I mentioned this to Councilmember Steckler before, is that they've been working on an arts and culture report. And it was, and I think many of you have taken the surveys because you probably shared it. I know that the city of Mill Creek was great in sharing it. There was two. There was for makers, people who are artisans, and then those of us who are interested. And the report's coming out now. They gave us a preliminary one, and I don't really want to discuss it because they're still like pulling it out. But I'm going to. I think it's really important to hear about the needs, what people were saying, both from the artists themselves and then those who are interested in it. There's good turnouts, I felt, for the numbers, and their consultants were very happy with it. And so just wanted to flag that I'll have that information. I'm going to have this conversation with our city manager to talk about what does that look like, whether it's just sharing the report or is there a presentation involved? I'm sure we love those, or what that is. But I found the preliminary information very, very helpful in understanding our needs when it comes to arts in Snohomish County.
Thank you. Councilmember Paddock.
Thank you. And speaking of arts, just congratulations to our two new Arts and Beautification Board members, Penelope and Peter. There's one additional position open, so please share the news on that so we can get that filled. I just want to also make another comment on the Meet the Chief, which was a fantastic event. I saw a lot of new faces that I haven't typically seen at some of our events, and I thought that was pretty terrific. I think events like that with new folks coming in actually does make our community a little bit safer. And having folks exposed to public safety and put a face to a public safety name and an officer, what you will, I think is pretty important. And thanks to the same people that have been mentioned from the chief, the officers, Barb, and the comms team. I also want to shout out, Barb took about 17 pictures of me on that bike. We did find one, was the right outfit and whatnot that really made that work. So I really do appreciate that. The other thing I want to call out is there's been a number of Chamber of Commerce changes, both at the board level, the staff level and whatnot. And I think what we've seen in that, I'll say what I've seen in that is a reinvigoration of the events that they've been holding. The number of folks that are participating in those events, they've kind of changed up the timing and the nature of those events. And I think that's another way for us to be able to get connected with that small business community. I hear from them a lot of what I think we hear from other folks in the survey that our comms team did around just the city being on the right track, our leadership being on the right track, the work they see out in the community around public safety, public works and whatnot. But on the other side of it, they also ask the same questions that I think we're starting to hear a lot more of, which is, how do we get X, Y, and Z area cleaned up? I keep driving past such and such. What's going on there? You hear that after 4 lunch and learns, and I've learned something at that lunch. We need to get that area cleaned up and need to pass that along too. I mean, in fairness on what that is. The other thing that I hear more there than anywhere else is what's going on with the sub area. When are we going to make a decision? What's going to happen? Because I think those folks are in a prime position to understand we need residents to support retail. And if we want our tax base to grow, we need to be able to make sure that the number of residents in our city grow. And we do that in an effective manner. So that's a big topic at those meetings. So anyway, that's my plug. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Paddock. Next up, we have audience communication. Do I have, I do have someone in the audience. I'll let you go first, Tanis. I see you, Will.
Tanis Golbieski, 3005 146th Place Southeast, Mill Creek. I just wanted to say that this week opens up the public portion of our Girl Scout cookie season. We have about 400 girls selling cookies in the Mill Creek area. We ordered and were delivered about 50,000 boxes last week, 28-ish palletized stacks of boxes. They've been distributed. They're already collecting more. Shipping is a big success. They sold out of a variety already. So I just want to say thank you to the city of Mill Creek, to all of the many businesses who are partnering with us. Whether it's letting us sell outside their stores or letting us post flyers in their stores for their customers. And also in return, obviously the girls really need to see an opportunity to be a part of their city. So having them here tonight to say the pledge was a big deal. And I think going forward, making sure that we're partnering with our youth organizations, things like the Earth Day celebration and other stormwater, what can we do to get them muddy? I think that'd be great. So anything that we can do to, I will volunteer them for whatever partnerships we can put together. Visiting the police station, I've already brought this troop here to visit the police station this year. They had a fabulous time. So thank you to the city for allowing those partnerships to happen, and to all the residents. Thank you.
Dennis, before you go.
Yeah.
We all need to know something.
Yeah.
What's the #1 cookie?
Yesterday was the Raspberry Rally, which over 50% of the shipped sales were Raspberry Rally, and they sold out across the country in less than 12 hours.
Wow. I missed
know.
that one.
I missed them too. I didn't get it. But the top seller is the Thin Mint.
Still
Still
after all these years.
Still after all these years, close second is the Samoa. And my personal favorite, the s'more, which they keep saying is going to go away, and they keep sending it to us. So,
We needed to know that. Thank you.
yeah, it's great.
Thank you. Next up, Barb.
Barb Heidel, 1401, 144th Place, Southeast Mill Creek. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I wish to express my gratitude and relief to the council for having decided to support our police chief. He knows his department, what is needed for the safety of our community, and he cares about our residents and will do everything in his power to do what's best for us. I understand your concerns, but the chief knows what he needs to do to have an effective police department. Thank you again for supporting him.
Thank you, Barb. And next up, Will.
Yeah, Will Nelson, 14925 29th Drive Southeast, Mill Creek, Washington. Regarding city manager's comment on the library, I didn't catch all of it, but if the library district is thinking of a new library for Mill Creek, the answer is no. And I view a new library for Mill Creek as fighting words. We do not need a new library in Mill Creek. We have tentative plans for a 3rd addition to the library, which might be okay if it was a digital library. And on to HB 110 and related subjects. How do you guys reconcile Mr. Paddock's comments regarding improvements to alleged improvements to Mill Creek Boulevard with more population vis-a-vis the 25,000 population limit now in tentative HB 110 in the legislature? Versus more apartments. We need more people to visit our businesses. And so I find the whole subject rather interesting in that regard. Everybody wants growth and everybody wants clean air, but growth means more population means more carbon foot. And so I find the subject interesting. Anyway. I read the papers nationwide, from Virginia to Maryland to California to here. And this whole housing thing, the do-gooders, and I do mean that in a pejorative sense, have been working on this and promoting this for years. And now the public is just becoming aware. And in many places, they're saying, no, we don't like this plan. And so it's, as I said before, it's not working well in California. They've been trying it for 2 years with the elimination of single family zoning. And the number of applications they've got for more housing, denser housing have not been great. So anyway, interesting subject, end of rant. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:29. Barely got in there. This evening. Thank you.